Hello, everybody. It's great to be here for another Beehive webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about social media and how you can leverage everything with socials to grow your newsletter, grow your following, and get more money. We've got Michael Houck here. Thank you so much for joining, Mike. Mike
What's up,
is
guys?
the founder of Megaphone, as well as a bunch of a newsletter, Houck's newsletter on Beehive. And I think there's much more that you're into, if I'm not mistaken. But you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm a startup founder. My last company raised 15 million, including a 10 million Series A from Andreessen Horowitz. Since then, I've sort of built up my personal brand across social media with over 100,000 followers and 60,000 subscriber newsletter. Recently changed the name from Houck's newsletter to Founding Journey, and also have Megaphone, which is a software platform to help you grow on social media and partner with big creators in your niche.
Amazing. Great intro. And then our other guest today is Bella Rose Mortel, the infinitely talented social media strategist over at Beehive. So if you follow our socials and you see the bee costume or any of our other great content, she is the one who's at the helm there. You want to give a quick intro beyond that?
Yeah, what's up? Hey you guys, I'm Bella Rose, social media strategist here at Beehive. EJ kind of stole my spiel. I was gonna say if you've seen any of our bee videos, I'm the bee. And maybe we have some more coming up soon. Maybe I'll put on the costume for the Q&A. We'll see. I'll have to stay to the end to see maybe if I will. But yeah, excited to chat social media today.
If she disappears, you know where she's going. Maybe it'll make an appearance. Amazing. Well, glad to have everyone here. We'll see hopefully a few more people trickle in as we get started, but thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with us today. We have a packed agenda that we'll cover in the next hour. So if you come to any of our other webinars, we always start with this kind of laying the groundwork section. As much as we'd like to say you can start just today and just jump into it while you can, there are a couple items that we recommend that will set you up with a strong foundation for success. So forgive me if you have already been to some of our webinars and you've heard this 2 or 3 times, but the first one is understanding your audience. At the core of launching a successful newsletter is really understanding who's going to be reading your newsletter and who you're writing to. The folks over at My First Million have a great exercise. Instead of trying to think about, the huge audience that you might be hoping to reach, try to think about one person you can visualize. Maybe it's that one perfect, we would call it maybe an ICP in like B2B terms, but that ideal reader, visualize their job, where they spend time online, what they're interested in, what problems they have. The more and deeper you can go into that persona and really understand who you're writing to, the easier all of the rest of this becomes. It becomes far easier to understand where you should focus your time on social media, what you should write about, what's going to be engaging, and how you can provide value to your subscribers. The second one is publishing consistently. Now, this is going to be specifically relevant to social media because consistent publishing is even more important when you're doing social media marketing. But with your newsletter itself, consistently publishing is really, really key because people are not going to trust you with their email address. They're not going to continue to follow and continue to engage if they can't expect some sort of continuous engagement. Now, this doesn't mean you have to have a daily newsletter, but if you do set the expectation that you're going to send a weekly newsletter, that has to be consistent week in and week out to build that trust. Time is scattered and fragmented across all of the different places that they can spend their attention these days. And so being that consistent voice, however often you show up, is critical. The third step isn't so much a necessary requirement, but it is really, really helpful. Understanding kind of where your niche lies, understanding what unique value you provide to the readers. So there's 1,000,001 crypto newsletters. If you're going to start a crypto newsletter, what is your unique spin? What is your niche within that? Maybe you specifically focus on a particular blockchain. Or if you're starting a food newsletter, you focus on a specific cuisine or a specific dietary restriction or whatever. It doesn't matter necessarily what the niche is, but understanding who you're writing to can obviously help you select that niche, but really getting very focused with that value proposition through selecting a niche is incredibly helpful. Now, this is new. If you've kind of zoned out with the other laying the groundwork stuff, this one's new, specific to this presentation today, and more of a piece of advice. When you're starting out, you're going to see a lot of different platforms. I'm sure you're aware of all the different platforms out there. We strongly recommend that when you're starting out, if you're newer to this, starting with one platform before you go wide. It's very tempting to, with the ease of access we have across social media, and maybe you yourself use 3 or 4 different social networks, at different points within the day. It's much more effective to focus on one network where you can go very deep and really understand the algorithm and build deeper relationships than it is to be kind of an inch deep and a mile wide across all of the different options that are out there. Now, it's not to say only post on one social media network, and it's not to say you will always only focus on one network or one platform. But when you're starting out, if you are at the beginning of your journey, focusing on one platform and really understanding and cracking the code there can be the difference between success and failure. Awesome. So as you can see, super important. These things, we'll keep repeating them at the beginning of every webinar. They cannot be dismissed. And the better you can do with these things, I promise you, and I'm sure these guys will shake their heads, the better you can do with these things, the easier everything else that we're going to talk about becomes. Because you'll draw from kind of this foundation when you're making decisions around like what content to post, all of the different things we're going to go into. Perfect. So our first step here is around the basics of newsletter brand building. So when we're talking about building a brand, one of the things is consistency, not necessarily just in publishing, but consistency in visual branding and tonal branding and all of these things that go into creating a brand is super important. You don't want to be disjointed or fragmented. There's two reasons for this. One would be you want people to know what to expect from you and kind of build that aura around the content that you provide. It could be very jarring if you have one tone of voice on one platform and a completely separate tone of voice on another. And the second is just practical. You're going to attract different people based on these different ways that you interact with social media audiences. And if you are acting in different ways, or if your brand is inconsistent, you're going to have a much harder time reaching that ideal person that you're trying to reach. So, consistency applies to everything from tone of your posts, the type of content that you share, the visual identity. A lot of people think about brand as like a logo, and the brand goes way, way beyond the logo. It's everything that we just mentioned. Next is, your brand extends to the way that you interact and engage with users. Some brands, may not interact as much, and some, have a very human face. A lot of newsletters specifically, because they are driven by personality, the founder will go on social media and engage very personally. Your decision whether to engage from kind of what we call like the face account, meaning like you as the founder or the writer, or the house account, can be a decision in itself. A lot of folks also have had success writing as like pseudonyms. You have folks who don't actually have a personal persona attached to it, but may have some sort of like pseudonym that they go by, where the actual identity of the writer may be a little bit obscured, but they build the brand around that persona. But engaging with users in your audience is a critical way that you can help enhance that brand in terms of creating loyal followers and loyal folks who may end up subscribing to your newsletter. Through your social media and through this branding process, you want to always keep at the center of your activity your unique proposition. Like, what is it that you are offering users? And that will really be the core from which everything else springs from. Goes back to the groundwork. You need to understand what is the value you provide to users, and always put that front and center. And then it generally helps to be relatable and authentic. I would say if there's exceptions to this, the exceptions break the rule, or prove the rule. Users like to interact with people who are human and not, in today's age of AI, people are even more wary than ever around AI generated content and having organic conversations and interactions. And so being able to show that human side can really be a differentiator in building your brand. I know brand is a little bit of an amorphous topic, so I'd love to get the perspective of Bella Rose and Mike here. Maybe Bella, kind of within the context, you've done a lot of really cool things to extend the beehiiv brand. The bee costume is one thing. There's also kind of like the tone in terms that we take on social media to be a little bit edgy or witty. By contrast, other ESPs may have a brand that's a little bit more buttoned up and a little bit more straight-laced. We'd love to hear some feedback on how you make the decisions on how we've positioned our brand, and Mike as well, after her.
Yeah. So the things that I really would love to double click on from this side is the engaging with followers personally and being relatable and authentic. And your own posts are super powerful, but don't underestimate the power of your comments and replies to people as well. That's a really fun way that we as beehiiv the brand will hop into conversations that we weren't already there. And that can be great for you as well if you want to promote your newsletter, promote your own personal brand. It's kind of showing your perspective, your opinion, and more of who you are in places where you weren't starting the conversation. And just to add to that, if anyone's on Threads now, there's a lot of visibility with the replies, more so sometimes even than your own posts. So if anyone is testing that out on Threads, it's definitely a good one there.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that. I think one thing I would add is this is not the place to skimp on time or effort with AI. A lot of people are looking for ways to do things faster right now, more efficiently, and much cheaper with AI, and that's good. You should be doing that, especially early on. But this is not one of those places where you need to build a relationship with people. You need to show them who you are, sort of to what Bella was saying. So yeah, I would just say when you're engaging with people on social media and trying to build that sense of community and brand, not a place to put AI in there.
Absolutely. And before we move on, I do want to double click on the point that Bella Rose made around, replies and likes being super important. Me, myself, some of you may recognize me from X. I've built a very small but significant following of 3,000 users, literally only from liking and replying to users. I have it's not called TweetDeck anymore, but whatever it's called, X Pro, whatever, where every misspelling, every spelling of beehiiv, every mention, anything related to our brand, I have a stream of in this tool. And every single person who, for a very long time, I think I've been a little bit lax on it, in the last couple, month or two, but for literally 2 years straight, every single day was going in and replying and commenting on anybody who was engaging. So answering questions about the platform, giving them, reposts or likes on positive comments, providing support if it was a less than ideal experience. And so that being said, just that act itself, not actually necessarily even creating anything new for myself, has created a following where, 3,000 is not a lot, but it's also not a little. And it's very helpful in extending the brand because now when we post about things, it just reaches a larger audience when we're able to do it. So yeah, definitely don't underestimate the power there. Cool. So once you have your brand set up, you have your visual identity, you have your tone, you have your unique selling proposition ready to go, you have your niche, you have all of this stuff prepared. Now you're actually ready to start posting on social media. Part of that process, I guess maybe it glossed over a little bit, but is understanding like where your audience lives online is like going to dictate where you want to start in terms of posting on social media. So I don't necessarily have like a specific slide. I don't think about like how to select which one to start with, but that really stems from where your audience is going to spend their time online. If you have a lot of people who are still on X, then like X might be the place where you start and you start building your following. If a lot of your audience, has been turned off by X and is now on Threads, Threads is a very, very vibrant place these days to, post and get a lot of impressions. If your audience is very visual and maybe leans more, to the younger side, maybe TikTok is where you want to spend all of your attention. If it's older, maybe it's Facebook and Instagram. But understanding who your audience and where they spend their time, if it's professionals, it's LinkedIn. Once you kind of really decide where that is that you're going to start, that's where kind of that brand building comes in. And then now we're going to talk about, posting and getting engagement. So the first bullet here is test, test, test. Nobody starts out in social media knowing exactly what's going to work, what's going to be really responded to, what's going to have super high engagement. The testing part here is really the only, or one of the only real consistent parts around social media. You always need to be testing. These companies are always making tweaks to the algorithm. Tastes are always changing. Trends are always changing. Societal kind of shifts are always happening. And so continuing to test constantly what gets engagement, what gets eyeballs, what gets responses, what gets likes, what, all of these different things. And this can be done in a relatively scientific way if you keep track of the metrics. These platforms do provide metrics in terms of, impressions. Most of them, pretty easily, readily share impressions. You can, calculate engagement rates, by taking the number of likes and reactions and dividing them by the impressions. You can do it kind of more anecdotally by saying, okay, I posted this and it got a lot of, response. What was it about this post that people responded to? But kind of continuously testing is going to really be the big takeaway from this slide to understand what your audience engages with. And Matt and Gary on one of our first webinars really put it, quite succinctly in saying that, if you have a newsletter, you're posting, weekly, which is the majority of people. You have one chance every week to reach those users and really kind of understand and get findings from that newsletter. And so if you're posting weekly, it's going to take you 4 weeks to get 4 exposures to that audience. And if you have a very, very high open rate. Social media, on the other hand, is one of the best places where you can really test and understand what your audience is going to respond to and take those learnings back to your newsletter, because you're not restricted to once a week. Hopefully you're posting way more than once a week. You could be posting, in theory, as much as you can possibly come up with ideas, which could be multiple times a day, it could be once a day. But it's the perfect testing ground for these ideas and concepts to really, really drill down on what is going to, get responses from your audience. As we saw in the previous slide, follower engagement, follower growth can be gained by comments, DMs, likes, just following and providing value. I'd say the first slide where we talked about authenticity and being yourself is super important. It's very easy for people to see when you're kind of like just, not really adding much to the conversation, just trying to shill yourself, and people don't like that. They'll really, really dislike that. But, if you can actually provide value and jump in and answer a question, that will lead to growth, because people will click on your profile to say, who is this person who's responding to me? Oh, cool, they have a newsletter. Or, if you create some sort of post that has some interesting content that is valuable to them, people will search you out. So there's that. One of the examples here was from Michael Parrish. I don't actually know off the top of my head his newsletter, but he is a beehiiv user. And so he's basically teasing the A/B test from his newsletter this week in a poll before it goes out to basically drive engagement. So showing, hey, these are the 4 that are going out. What do you think is gonna do best? And hopefully he's gonna get some responses and drive some engagement there. Kind of along those lines, through that testing process, I hate the word kind of hack in terms of the context of growth and marketing, but there are ways you can kind of learn to kind of hack the algorithm. A couple months ago, Twitter's algorithm was released, and anybody could go and read like what and how Twitter was rating different engagement signals. And so it was one of the rare glimpses we have into being able to understand, okay, this is how Twitter specifically is ranking posts and exposing it. And if you can see that, if you can kind of pick up on those signals, you can tailor your content, you can tailor the reactions and responses you're getting from your audience to get favorable placements by algorithms. And the people who are best at social media do this extraordinarily well. Typically that comes with native formats, so we'll connect in this in a minute with the talk about cross-posting, but the key here is that you really want to be native to the platform. You can't just take content from one platform and drop it on another platform and expect it to perform the same. And lastly, over time, you will build a community through this process. If you follow these, 3 or 4 steps, you will start to build kind of this cohort around you of people who recognize you. I'm sure Michael knows a bunch of people who, like, if he's ever on X or another platform, maybe he's on Threads now, there's names and faces that you see over and over and over again. And, especially when you have a brand, there's people that you see over and over again. One of my favorites, very early user of beehiiv named Ian Roth. He may even be here today, although he works during the day, so maybe not. But he was always just responding to beehiiv, stuff, and I just kind of got to see him, and it turns out he lived like very close to me, so we got a beer together, took it offline. But it was one of those things where just like consistent social media engagement led to kind of this very close connection and engagement. I know I kind of went over a lot there, Bella Rose and Michael. Mike, maybe start with you. What are your kind of secrets and kind of go-to strategies for driving engagement wherever you're posting?
Yeah, I mean, I would go back to something you said a little earlier first, which is like in terms of what platform to choose. There's 2 considerations. There's the consideration of where your audience is, which is paramount, but there's also like your skill set. Right? Some people are better on camera with video. Some people are better writing their thoughts out for like LinkedIn or Threads or X. So find that mixture, and that's where you should start, in my opinion. And then once you get to that place, sort of ride whatever the current thing is. These platforms love to push hot topics. They love to push trends, and whatever other people are talking about, that's what you should be talking about if you want to get free impressions. So if there's some big news in your industry or something like that, try to make interesting, either insightful or funny content about that. Use power words to drive emotion. Sean Purry has a great framework on this. I highly recommend checking out his content on power words, and make them feel some sort of emotion. That way they'll respond, they'll reshare it to their friends or to their network, or leave a comment in some way. So those are, I think, the big things I would say. In terms of getting engagement, you can ask questions directly to your audience, either at the end of a TikTok or at the end of a thread. You can ask people to repost it if they find it interesting or useful. Little things like that actually do make a difference. They kind of look cringe and corny sometimes, but they really do send powerful signals to the algorithm that this is valuable content that people want to share. And that means that you show up more in other people's feeds.
Amazing. Great advice. Bella Rose, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just kind of echo what Mike just said about like asking questions and kind of asking for engagement. I know it does like sound really cringe, but the reality of the situation is people love to talk about themselves and people love to share their own perspective to things. And then like from beehiiv's brand account, we shared like, oh, share your newsletter below. So many replies. Like, so if you are asking people for what they think and starting those conversations, that's a great way to maximize engagement as well.
Yeah, one of the kind of big early social media wins we had, I think this might have been before you joined, Bella Rose. As crazy as it sounds, we had a couple social media wins before you joined. It was at the very, very beginning of ChatGPT. We did a thing where we were like, drop your newsletter and we'll write a haiku. And of course the haiku was just like dropping some content into ChatGPT and saying, hey, write a haiku about this. And so I take like the description or the title or both and drop it in ChatGPT and have a haiku. It got like 900 replies. It was very, very well received. And people loved like just seeing kind of what novelty, ChatGPT would come up with. But that rode kind of 2 different trends. It rode the trend of being able to get replies and replies to those replies, which helped get exposure within the Twitter algorithm at the time. And then it also rode the wave of ChatGPT, where it was this new thing that like not that many people had heard of, and people who, it was a novel thing where if we said, hey, we're going to make a haiku, people weren't necessarily thinking, oh, they're just going to ChatGPT and doing this. But people were like, oh, are you guys using this new thing, ChatGPT? And we're like, yeah, we are. But it was not, it was like well received because they're like, oh, cool, it's this new thing. So way that you can kind of leverage a bunch of different things, trends, and the algorithms to succeed.
And I thought this whole time you were a poet, EJ.
Cool. So our next item here is making that step of moving somebody from a platform that you're engaging with them on into the actual newsletter itself. So converting followers to subscribers. We kind of covered a little bit of this. Mike did at the end of that, in terms of adding those calls to action at the end. I think some of them are, follow to obviously deepen the relationship on platforms, but you can also, of course, at some point you want to convert those newsletters those followers to subscribers. And so, the simplest way is to include a call to action. The example here, this person, Chris Mo, I actually don't know who this person is. I just found him on LinkedIn, but they had posted that they just switched their newsletter to beehiiv. They talked about a little bit about the history of the newsletter. And then at the end, they have this, you can subscribe to their newsletter here. So anybody who's on LinkedIn, 68, reactions, that's like quite a bit. For LinkedIn, so pretty good engagement with that, and I'm sure they picked up a number of subscribers from that. And so clear call to actions, as clear as saying, hey, click this link to subscribe to my newsletter, click the link in my bio to subscribe to my newsletter. A lot of people, if you can see the little arrow on the screen, LinkedIn lets you add a little custom link here, and so a lot of the folks who run newsletters will say like subscribe to my newsletter as the call to action here, so that whenever you show up in LinkedIn, people will always very readily have that call to action available. It doesn't have to be obviously every post, but if you can get some social proof from existing newsletter subscribers through a feedback survey or just people reaching out to you on social media saying, hey, really love the newsletter. Sharing just stuff like that can be very, very effective in creating that social pull to be like, okay, this person is raving about this newsletter, maybe I should check it out. Even if they don't subscribe right away, you're building that awareness to get them over there. So next would be teasing exclusive content in your newsletter. So a lot of times I've seen very well done on both LinkedIn and Reddit specifically because they're can be more text-based. But people will post specifically maybe on LinkedIn's kind of newsletter long form post feature. They'll post the first part of their newsletter on LinkedIn, and then they'll say, click here to read the rest of it on my newsletter. And so it kind of takes them from LinkedIn, leverages some of LinkedIn's built-in distribution and kind of hacking the algorithm in that way, and transports them over to the newsletter at the end of it. On Reddit, similar, they'll make a post about something that's interesting, a case study, whatever the content's about. It obviously should be relevant to whatever subreddit you're posting in. At the end of it, they'll have if you like this and you want to read more of these, you can subscribe to my newsletter, or they'll post the first part of it, and then it's like, if you want to learn more, if this was useful, you can read more about whatever the topic is over here at this link. And so if done tactfully, that can be very, very successful. Reddit can be a very tricky, harsh place for people who are self-promoting. So you've got to really dial yourself in. A lot of subreddits have rules around, self-promotion and stuff like that. But if you can show up authentically and really understand the native formats there, you can be quite successful. There's a lot of folks within the beehiiv community who will talk about and provide some guidance on how to succeed with Reddit. I've seen a bunch of those posts across LinkedIn and X before. I covered the linking to the newsletter in your bio. I should file the bullet points and go in order, but I covered that. You can use like a link in bio tool to do it in platforms that maybe don't have the native feature to have multiple links. Right now, Instagram has ability to have multiple links. We have the call to action here on LinkedIn. TikTok can still be challenging, but if you have a link bio tool, you can stack them all there. And then lastly, I think I saw a question in here in the chat about this, but I think we'll go into this a little bit deeper in a minute. But creating dedicated lead magnets, you can do an entire presentation about this, and I think in some of our past ones we've gone way deeper into lead magnets. But a lead magnet is basically a resource, can be a video, can be a guide, can be a template, can be a calculator, can be really any piece of content that provides value to your audience. And so the idea here is that you provide this piece of content, and in return for the content, users will provide an email or a subscription. And so when they subscribe, you deliver them that resource. So could be an ebook or a template on, one of the things I'm working on is like a Looker Studio, which is just an analytics tool, a Looker Studio template where you can just plug your own data in and it's going to visualize important metrics. And so for some folks that might be useful, and they might give us their email in return for that resource. But that's a good way to use the distribution that you have on social media to get folks to take an action other than just asking them. Cool. So moving to cross promoting, I kind of foreshadowed this a little bit earlier, but this is kind of where we're getting from, you got your sea legs under you, you're going deep on one platform, you've got some great engagement, and so you're saying, okay, I want to branch out and expand. I want to go from just posting on Twitter, I want to jump into LinkedIn as well now, or I want to go from TikTok and I want to also post on Instagram because, very visual media. So the key is that, repurposing content across platforms is good. It's a great strategy. You should take content and repurpose it so that you're not doing multiple things like multiple times. You don't have to create all, new content. You can, but it just takes more time, and a lot of us are time constrained. So repurposing content is a great strategy. However, and this is the critical part, it's important that you tailor the content you're creating to the platform's native strength. So if you're taking a TikTok video and you've done a lot of work to create it, it's not necessarily going to be the optimal strategy to just take that TikTok video and just drop it on Instagram or just drop it on LinkedIn, even though they do have some of these video features. You may want to modify the cut down so that you are talking more maybe about business topics on LinkedIn compared to what you're doing on TikTok. Or you may want to create more of a text-based post that is a complement to whatever your video posting if you're going from like TikTok to LinkedIn. That's probably a weird jump, but we've specifically found that the audiences on Instagram react very differently to our videos that we post on TikTok. So sometimes it's not even about just taking the video and maybe resizing it or cutting it differently. It could be completely different content. I'd love to get Bella Rose's input here because she is the queen of working across different platforms. We're active on like 1 million, and every time we meet, she's telling me, like, giving me updates on like what's working, what's not working, what we're changing, what we're doing to come up with different strategies for different platforms. So I'd love to lean on her expertise to help with this.
Yeah. I love this idea of like tailoring to each platform's native strengths because of the idea of like content platform fit. The thing that I really want to emphasize that you can say the same thing and like send the same message across all these platforms. It's just like changing or tweaking a few things to make it work. So if you like filmed a video, you can put that on Instagram and you can put on LinkedIn, but maybe all that info is in a text post on X and on Threads. And another way you could do that is take that text, put it on a graphic, and then there's your second Instagram post, your second way that you're serving it to your audience in like a static carousel post, which can also go on LinkedIn. And so that's literally one content idea that we've already spread out like 6 different ways. And so that is going to help with your testing and help you see like what your audience is really resonating with. And another thing, just kind of going off of that, if you're not like absolutely sick to your stomach about how many times you've said like your value prop, your offering, whatever, like you haven't said it enough. Like you could have 30,000 followers, but each one of your posts is gonna get maybe 2,000 views. And so nobody saw it. Like nobody saw it. You need to like keep saying it over and over and over again. I promise you it's not annoying, and it's actually gonna be way more helpful if you really like drill down like what you're about, because the more like that content bank is going to grow and people are going to see it, and like it's going to end up working. So that would be my main piece of advice for content platform fit.
Before I jump over to Mike, I want to double click on that because I think that's such an valuable piece of insight that so many folks in leadership or even marketing folks don't necessarily appreciate, and it doesn't just go to social, it goes to internal messaging, it goes to email. It's like if you have a 35% open rate, which is not terrible. It's not fantastic, but it's probably right around average. Every email that you send is only being seen by 1/3 of your audience. So it's like conceptually, if like only 1/3 of your audience and they're totally unique see it, and you send 3 emails, like it's gonna take 3 times for you to get that message to everybody in your audience. And that's if like the subsequent people are totally unique, which they never are. There's something I read in like a management book that for like leadership that's like you should be repeating kind of the main vision points that you want to get across the organization like 7 people need to hear it like 7 times before they like realize, okay, this is actually like an important like part of the core mission. It's like even if you say it in like a leadership position, people don't really internalize it until you hear it like 7 times. And so if it takes 7 times for people within an organization to really internalize something, just imagine kind of how often it's going to take people hearing the same message to really internalize it with such a transient point as like a relationship between a newsletter and subscriber. So I love that. That's actually something that I haven't necessarily seen come up before in some of the research I was doing. So I love that piece of info. Mike, I know that you're doing a lot across a lot of different places. You have had a lot of experiences. Is there anything that you'd like to add to the strategy around distribution?
I mean, I think Bella's point is spot on. The more you say it, it's not a bad thing. Don't worry about annoying your followers or anything like that. One thing I would add is that when you are cross-posting to different platforms, and even just creating any content in the first place for social media, you should be spending 90% of your time on the hook. If it's a video, the first 2 to maybe up to 5 seconds. And if it's a tweet or a post on LinkedIn, the first like 3 lines, and that's it. That's where you're going to get people to actually care about the rest of it. That's where you need to hook them. That's where you need to tell the little bit of story or hint at what's coming, that there's going to be value here. And that is an interesting post that they should spend their time on. Ultimately, that's the most important thing.
Before we get into paid ads, or maybe actually we can do this as a part of paid ads, because I think there's some connection. One thing that I think that might have been a miss that maybe I'll go back and add before we drop this to the rest of the audience is really going through, I want to take like a little bit of a sidebar. We have the time, and kind of go through what are like the key parts of like the key structure generally of a really successful like social post. Obviously it's going to depend on the format, whether it's video or text, or a tweet might only just be one line, so it's not necessarily going to have like multiple parts. But would love to hear from both of you kind of how you guys think about creating a post that's going to be well received. Mike, you mentioned the hook, and that's incredibly important, and that's universal. So it's like the hook is like incredible for both text and video. You obviously have the call to action to close it out. How do you guys think about, the kind of in between or the middle part? And do you differentiate, certain posts that maybe have a hook and a call to action from other types of posts that may just be there for engagement, where it's like a one-liner? And I say that, I want to take the sidebar now because I think this is a really important distinction to make before we start talking about ads, because a lot of times ads may be either specifically created, for an ad. They call them kind of like the dark post, where if you create the ad and it only runs as an ad. But it also, a lot of times people will see what is successful as an organic post and just take that and boost that to their audience. And so kind of understanding these different format types or formats of posts, I think would be really, really helpful within the context of paid ads.
Yeah, I mean, I can go first. I think it depends on what your goal is, right? Like I always like to think about something as, what am I trying to get the other person, the other side of this person who's watching it or reading it do? And so, in most cases, the outcome that I want is to have them sign up for my newsletter, or to check out my SaaS platform, or to just get deeper into my ecosystem, right? Maybe even it's just to follow me, right? If those are the outcomes, then you need to provide 10x more value up front than you think you do. So just posting like a question to get a bunch of replies and people fighting in the comments and things like that, that's not going to sort of make people trust you necessarily as much as, hey, here's a long thread with, my 5 best tips for, whatever your niche is, something within that niche, right? So demonstrating expertise, demonstrating knowledge, demonstrating that you're one of them, being the people who are checking out the content, that's going to do a lot more to build that trust and get people to take that next level step.
Amazing. I love that. And you'll see a lot of those themes, I think, coming through. We don't do a super deep dive into like examples of ads, but generally you are going to have the image that should stop people's thumbs or whatever. You want to go, if it's an image-based platform, you want to capture their attention, but then it's like once they are stopped and are reading, it's like that hook is the key part. And so you see even kind of there's this thing called the squint test, where it's like if you squint, what is the first thing you can see? And even in this picture right here, it's quite small on my screen, but it's like this is from the TLDR newsletter, not on beehiiv, but maybe one day. You can see their ads are reach 4 million tech professionals actively reading TLDR daily emails. So it's like it's not quite a hook in the way that they're talking about, but they're identifying their audience, and that if you are a tech professional, there's 4 million other tech professionals reading this newsletter. You might be missing out if you're not that tech professional. And so maybe these could be use better hooks, and maybe there's a better hook in the text, but we'll jump into this. So unlike with kind of organic social, where you're creating content that is meant to kind of target a specific user, but it's going to be done organically through the platform's organic algorithmic distribution, paid ads are done a little bit differently. Obviously, you still want to create your content with that end user in mind, because you want to get more users like that. But kind of unlike organic social, you have a lot more control over who the ad is going to be shown to. And so this is where a lot of work should be done in understanding, not just in terms of like who your audience is, in terms of, what do they do, where do they spend their time online, but based on whatever tools you have available within a particular ad platform, what are potentially other things that they like that you can use as proxies to find that user? Because a lot of times, your exact user is not necessarily defined by a preset, audience within a platform. So if you're trying to reach tech professionals, it's pretty broad, so like there's probably is tech professionals in most platforms, but it's like if they like something that is relevant to tech professionals, you can use that as a proxy. But in that way, understanding your audience and understanding kind of very holistically goes a long way to be able to use those targeting tools to create these targeting audiences that your ads are going to be shown to. Understanding your goals in the terms of ads, generally we're going to be trying to target and move people to subscribe, and that's like pretty much typically kind of the end of that conversion cycle. So see an ad, click the ad, subscribe, and then understanding how much you can pay to acquire a specific subscriber. And that goes into your personal newsletter, your business economics of how much is a subscriber worth to you as a newsletter, and how are you, that goes into how you're monetizing, the lifetime value of a user. We have a great calculator that will include, and I think Tony can drop in the chat in a second, that basically breaks down, you can put some inputs in and it'll tell you what your subscriber is worth to you. But basically all of these things you need to look at at the top of the process before you jump into it, so you can understand like where you need to move to. If you understand that your lifetime value of a subscriber is $6 and you want to get that 3x return on your ad spend, that means that you have to acquire your subscribers for $2, which means that if you start running ads and you're at 3, you need to continue doing work to optimize those. And that can be done in a couple different ways that we'll cover kind of at a very high level, but you need to understand the goal, subscribe, the economics of what that subscriber is worth, and like how you're going to actually identify who the ads should be shown to. In some cases, if you're starting a newsletter on the back of an existing either social property or business, retargeting website visitors with ads can be a very effective tool. Basically, people who are already familiar with the broader brand are probably more likely to subscribe. If you already have their email, obviously that's one thing. You can just usually port a customer list over to a newsletter, but you may have tons of visitors that are coming to your e-com site and that aren't signing up, but or aren't purchasing, but may be induced to sign up for a newsletter. You see that a lot with the kind of the way that HubSpot bought the Hustle. Now they have a way that they can gain more share of the voice in the market by getting people to subscribe to the newsletter so that they see the HubSpot brand rather than purely having to just send ads at these audience of professionals and hope that they sign up for the actual software itself. One of the things that's really close to my heart that kind of has been very, very valuable in my career is very, very deep kind of levels of analytics and tracking. I don't really think of myself as a particularly talented creative marketer, but I haven't needed to be because I'm able to understand what works better in a very quantitative way. I can see that version A works better than version B, so we're going to double down on version B and figure out what made version B more successful and do more of that. So beehiiv as a platform comes with built-in what's called event tracking. We have a bunch of tutorials on how to set this up in about 5 minutes, but basically it provides a way that ensures that the only time a conversion in these ad platforms is tracked is when a user successfully uniquely subscribes to your newsletter. So seen in times, people set up the event to fire a subscription when somebody clicks the subscribe button. Very, very bad in terms of tracking, because if for some reason they entered the email wrong, or you have the extra security on the site, and once they click the subscribe button, it's going to give them the extra challenge to prove that they're human. They're going to click that again, and so basically you're going to be counting 2 subscriptions for one person. Literally handled this with a big enterprise level client just a couple weeks ago, and it was it was a huge issue for them, and it just turns out that they weren't using the built-in event tracking. The other way to do it is to thank you page tracking. So if you're going to send somebody to a sign up and then they're going to redirected, I don't prefer that method either, because again, if somebody refreshes that page, it can be double tracked. There's other ways, if somebody, finds that page online, you can basically inflate your subscription number. So taking advantage of the tools that we provide can give you a very, very clean view of how users are subscribing. We also have ways to plug into the conversion APIs, and this gets a little bit confusing and kind of high level. So if it is, just maybe tune out for a second, but know that we'll share the resources. But we provide the ways that you can pass back personal information in an ethical, privacy-centric way to these ad platforms, so that you can match basically users who clicked an ad to the users who subscribed, which gives you very clear data. And so that clear data helps the algorithms learn and serve your ad to more relevant people. And then again, focusing on those metrics that matter. If you're trying to drive a lower cost per action, or CPA, so cost per sign up, understand what that metric is, get a very good handle on it in terms of your tracking, and test to bring that down. If the CPA itself isn't necessarily as valuable, but you have a target return on ad spend and you're tracking that, maybe you have premium subscriptions, you're running ads, you're tracking that return from those ads can be another metric that you use that may be a little bit different than CPA. If you know that you're making 3x from a specific user, and that user is bringing you $20, then maybe you couldn't pay more. You can pay $8 to bring them in if you know that they're going to bring you back $20 in a short time. The biggest thing here is to test your ad copy, test your ad creative, test your landing page creative, your descriptions, your visuals, everything about it. You can really get very, very granular with every step of the ad process to make sure that you are doing the best that you can to optimize your ad spend. I know that this isn't an area that most newsletter publishers are super familiar with, so if some of that sounds very technical and confusing, again, I promise you we will share the resources on how to set up some of that ad tracking in some of our crash courses in the post the recording post after this, but we also have a couple webinars that we've done in the past specifically about ads and monetization that you can also look at if you want to get a little bit of a deeper dive into it. Is there anything that you guys want to like demystify and kind of say in more layman's terms or in a clearer way than what I just covered?
I think you did a great job covering kind of the whole spectrum, but a few things I would add. We've added tens of thousands of subscribers via paid ads across Instagram, Facebook, X, and some other places. I think a lot of people get into this game of trying to get the lowest CPA possible, right? But that's not actually the only thing that you should be doing. You should also be trying to get the highest LTV customers that you can, or readers that you can. These are more valuable readers who are going to buy your products more often at higher price points. And also they'll help attract advertisers more effectively because either you'll be able to say, oh, look at who we have, maybe anonymize their emails, but just show the domains, attract the right advertisers, and also then send them clicks that convert at higher rates. And so they come back and renew with you. So I would just say it's not just about getting your CPA down to $1.50 or $1. It's, you can pay $5 for a subscriber if that subscriber is going to pay you, $15, $20 on average when you have them sign up. So that's what I would say there. And then one other thing I would just throw in there is we talked a lot about organic social, and you can actually spend budget through like quote unquote organic social through Megaphone, which is a network that we've set up. Basically, we have a few hundred big creators in various niches with millions of followers who are looking to actually engage with either reposting or leaving comments on content that you put out that's interesting, maybe about your newsletter or maybe just to build your audience on the platform. So I'll drop the link in the chat. But just megaphone.network and really easy to partner up with those creators on the platform. We
actually have a quick little playbook. So something I've started doing is including like playbooks that you guys can implement kind of today, or once we get the deck to you, that can be really, really easily step-by-step implemented. So one of those is a Megaphone playbook we'll go over in 1 second.
Oh, cool.
I do want to double click on the thing that Michael said about basically optimizing around CPA versus other metrics like LTV and such. A little bit of a variation on that is one of the things that I've seen, quite a bit that's very tempting is, for Instagram and Facebook specifically, there's an ad format called lead forms where they don't take the user off of the platform. It just kind of pulls up a window that says, hey, would you like to submit your email and name? And it pre-fills it because they have your information. And so like it's super easy. It's like they click the ad, it pulls up this lead form, your information's already in it. So all you have to do is hit submit, and that subscribes a user. Now, that can be great, and that actually typically leads to a much lower CPA than taking someone to your website and having them sign up there. And so you might say, okay, if we're going for a lower CPA, high sign-up volume, that's the way to go. However, one of the things that is very consistent and pernicious about that is that sometimes that little bit of friction from just going off-site to your website can lead to a much better quality of subscriber. And this is something we've seen almost universally, where having it be so easy to give that information will typically lead to, or can lead to, kind of a lower quality of subscriber, where it's almost too easy for them to give the information. And at the end of the day, Facebook's algorithm is just going to optimize towards the goal you tell it to do. So if you have these users who are just very easily subscribing, maybe not even really understanding necessarily what they're doing when they're subscribing, that will then show up in terms of like lower open rates, lower engagement rates, which can be a net bad thing. So you could be growing, but you might not actually be growing the number of eyeballs who are seeing your content, which at the end of the day is the point. So it's like if your goal is to get to advertisers, it's much better to have a smaller list that has a much higher open rate and engagement rate than it is to have a gargantuan list that's got a very low open rate. And so you can do this very easily with segments within beehiiv, monitoring the quality of the subscribers that come from these different ad platforms. And you can use some of that data to make your decisions of saying, okay, cool, the users from platform A, getting a lot more of them, but they're engaging at a much lower rate. The open rates are much lower. Folks from platform B, maybe they're a little bit more expensive, but they're actually, the open rate is sky high, meaning that they have a better fit and they're a greater affinity towards your newsletter. Moving on, there's a couple playbooks. I'm not going to go over all of them, so we have a couple minutes to do the Q&A, but We'll just go over them quickly. We do have this playbook on setting up a lead magnet offer. So creating a lead magnet. There's tools like ManyChat that can auto-respond to DMs and comments. So you can say, hey, comment, whatever phrase, and we'll send you this resource. This is one of the tips that Bella Rose, I think, uses to great effect quite often. With ManyChat specifically, there's other tools like Hype Fury. You can do the same thing with X. And then you basically can ask for likes, posts, or reposts, comments, DMs, whatever you want in return for that asset. You can even say, hey, go to my site and subscribe, and I'll send you it in the welcome email. The second one is for collecting UGC for use across social media. So if you set up a poll for your newsletter to collect feedback, you can basically identify users who give you great feedback. You can use segmentation to find the highest engaged users, and you can set up automations then to reach out to those users requesting that they give you a testimonial or film like a quick video that you can then post on your socials. Third is using Megaphone to amplify your presence. So create a Megaphone account and fund that profile, as Michael said. Post your content on X or LinkedIn just like normal, and then you share the URL to that post within Megaphone with a budget, and folks within the Megaphone community will take that post and amplify it and get paid for it. You can level up your referral program using social media by adding a referral milestone within your beehiiv referral program or any other referral program. Determine the appropriate number of referrals that you want to offer this for. If you have a very large social following, maybe this is something that requires many more, referrals than just one or two. But whenever a subscriber reaches that milestone level, you can celebrate the subscriber's support by shouting them out on social or including them in the newsletter itself. And that's a way to kind of, just people love it when they see kind of the ego part, when they see themselves in social media, and they maybe even get a couple followers out of it. So we have a couple moments for a quick Q&A. I have a question here that they wanted to hear more about lead magnets and how to promote on social media to build a newsletter. I just kind of went over that playbook, so maybe that answers it, but I think lead magnets are a very popular topic. Michael, can you tell us a little bit how you've used lead magnets successfully in the past, and maybe within the realm of social media specifically, because there's tons of different ways in which lead magnets can be applied.
Yeah, so lead magnets were one of, if not the most effective growth strategy on social that we used early on when we didn't have that many subscribers. I think we went from a few thousand subscribers to 25K in about 6 weeks just by posting one lead magnet once per week on X and LinkedIn. We use Tweet Hunter and Taplio. ManyChat sort of lets you do some of the same things, but basically you can schedule your post. You can set conditions based on what people need to do in order to get a message from you with the link to sign up for the lead magnet. And so when they would leave a comment or they would repost it, we would DM them automatically, and they'd get a link to a card landing page. And on that landing page, they would drop their email. Once they dropped their email, they were automatically redirected to the lead magnet and get the value that we promised. But also when they dropped it, they got subscribed to our newsletter automatically. And we used Megaphone to amplify those posts. And so they got a lot of attention from big creators who then, because they commented or reposted, it got exposed to their audiences who we had matched them in the right niche. So it was highly relevant people.
Amazing. That's great to hear. I think it sounds like we need to give Megaphone a try. I wasn't familiar with that tool before you shared it, and so I'm excited to see if we can get a little bit of amplification there. Bella Rose, would you mind giving us a couple tips around tools that you use to promote across different social media platforms?
Tools to promote across social media?
Yeah, I'm thinking kind of like we use Assembly. There's ManyChat. What are some of the things that you use to basically manage your workflow?
Yeah, so like EJ said, we use Assembly to kind of like schedule things out across all of our social media. The reason why I really like Assembly is because you can load multiple people's accounts in there and kind of like auto engage, auto first comment from like your personal. So if you have a brand account for your newsletter and also you're growing your own personal brand, like that's a great way to kickstart that content ecosystem. He also mentioned ManyChat, which is what we use on our Instagram post mostly. It's like we say comment a specific word, and then we'll send you this resource, this lead magnet, like how to get your next 1,000 subscribers, etc. So if any of your newsletters are resources in that way, that could be a great way to like share your posts with them. I would say like those are the main ones that we use, but there's also like Tweet Hunter and other things. I don't know if like y'all are really into that, but I would say that Assembly and ManyChat are the means that we use to kind of promote things.
Yeah, personally, I've used Hype Fury for kind of that auto DM thing with Twitter. Sprout Social is another social media. It's a little bit more expensive. Yeah, Mike, do you have any that you go to aside from Megaphone?
Yeah, I mean, we've used Tweet Hunter and Taplio specifically for those platforms, but now that we're doing YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram as well, just recently started those platforms, we're looking for a new home. So I know the founder of Assembly, and she's trying to get me to use it. So maybe I'll finally convert with Bella Rose's recommendation.
Yeah, let me give
Amazing,
you
yeah.
my affiliate link, actually.
Please do.
Yeah, I've been super happy with that. It's funny, I get these emails because I'm on the account and with like the name of the social post, and it's always fun to see like what Bella Rose is naming the different social campaigns. It's been a good amount of moodang lately. So cool. Somebody asked, what's the plan for a tool to import subscribers from LinkedIn newsletters to your platform? So I can take that one. We don't have a plan currently. LinkedIn doesn't actually provide those emails. I would not really consider LinkedIn's newsletter platform or feature really a true newsletter. It's really more of a long form post kind of extension of their platform. And I say that, I make that distinction because the key value of a newsletter is the ability to take and have that one-to-one relationship with your subscribers. And so if you don't have the ability to have that user's email, you don't own that subscriber, you don't own that relationship. It's literally just the same thing as posting on social media. And so that is to say, the other part is I think we have very strong opinions around how they do their numbers around subscribers. They are almost certainly like fudging things. I don't know if it's quite, it'd be proper to say it's like fraud outright, but basically they take a lot of liberties with like what they consider a subscriber based on like who you're connected with and what is considered delivery in terms of like how people are getting it, because they leverage like the notification features and they are able to serve it in feeds. And so they play a little fast and loose with those metrics compared to traditional newsletter platforms, which makes it a little bit difficult. And so the answer is there's not really a way to export those subscribers. LinkedIn doesn't provide it. There's no way we can hook into an API. But what we've seen people do is you can use tools like Phantom Buster or a VA to basically identify who those users are, the profiles of the users who have subscribed, quote unquote, and DM them a message saying, hey, I saw you like my newsletter, on LinkedIn, would love for you to get the kind of longer version or the full version, or subscribe to like the actual, newsletter off platform, whether that's on beehiiv or anywhere else. And in that way, on top of kind of doing the teaser method where you post part of it and then send them to your newsletter for the rest of it, that can be a way where you can actually get users, who obviously have already shown interest in what you have to say, get them moving off of LinkedIn and into your actual newsletter where you own that relationship. The last question that I had here was somebody asked about, the best way to monetize and introduce tiers. I'm not going to cover the answer there, but I would point you towards our webinar on monetization that we launched a couple weeks ago, where we talk about all of the different ways and how to monetize subscriptions. And there's a bunch of resources there that might be helpful. But we're coming up right on time. I do want to plug one last thing. We have our beehiiv community called The Hive, which is on Slack. This is open to all paid beehiiv members. And so it can be an incredible resource for folks to get their questions answered, to bounce ideas off of folks. There's channels for how to, if they want to figure out how to do like some complicated, sophisticated, workaround, or not workaround, but like, workflow, or product suggestions, so that they can suggest, additions to our product roadmap, recommendations where people trade recommendations within the platform, bunch of stuff, you can get people to like give you feedback on your newsletter. It's an incredibly valuable resource. We have, I'd say probably dozens, if not hundreds of posts a day, thousands of people. They're all active members because they're all active beehiiv users. If they, for whatever reason, cancel the beehiiv subscription, no longer in the platform, in the community. And so it really is kind of one of the most high impact places to be. So if you like this and you want to kind of dive deeper, can't recommend more signing up for a premium version of beehiiv to get access to the community, as well as all of the paid features, and many of them which we've touched on today. With that said, I want to give a great thanks to Michael for taking his time today, being a longtime beehiiv supporter. It means the world to us to have all of you on this call today listening to us, but also to have Mike spend his valuable time. I highly encourage anybody who's growing their newsletter to go out, check out megaphone.network to take advantage of that tool. Bella Rose, as always, your insights are invaluable. You're the best. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. And in the background, Tony has been answering questions and dropping links. And so I want to give a shout out to him behind the scenes. You guys can't see or hear him, but he's here. But with that, spiel over. Thank you so much for the 47 of you who are still here with us. I appreciate your time, and I hope that you will join us for our next webinar, the schedule which can be found at beehiiv.com/webinars. And you'll also get notifications in app and by email if you're an existing Beehiiv user. Thank you so much to everyone. Have a great day.